Chapter 91. Sponsored content. Sunhwa's body began to spasm, almost like she was getting electrically shocked. Her pupils looked like they were covered with a white film. A strange sound came from her mouth. Grr, grr. I was well informed about this phenomenon. Called possession, it was caused by one of three possible things. The first was demon realm parasites. The second was a mind control attack from a ghost-type monster, a kind of spirit monster. The third was the aftermath from a guardian's descent. The great explorer Jackson explained it like this. Divided even further, the causes of possession can be classified in 6 different ways, but generally, we differentiate the causes in 3 ways. Thankfully, mankind has come up with preventative measures for each case. Demon realm parasites hid in the human brain, controlling the human's actions while consuming brain tissue. An outstanding cleric player can exterminate the parasites without much trouble. The host of the demon realm bugs must immediately request the help of a cleric of at least level 50. In this respect, Korea's medical system is very well established. If those bugs were to appear in the world right now, we wouldn't be able to do a thing about them, but I didn't think that was happening yet. I didn't see the symptoms of demon realm bug affliction. If a person is afflicted by demon realm bugs, their eyes will turn pitch black, followed by their hands and feet. They will present with similar symptoms to a pearl centipede affliction. Sunhwa was making a bizarre sound that was neither groaning nor breathing roughly, just a very odd sound. Keg. It didn't seem like she was afflicted by demon realm bugs. The method to determine whether the patient has suffered the mind control attack of a ghost monster is very simple. All you have to do is ask the possessed person a question. If they don't answer the first time, ask them multiple times. It was like Columbus's egg. The method to diagnose a ghost monster attack was hard to come up with, but once it was discovered, it was an easy thing anyone could do. I'll ask again. Who are you? Keg, Pshee. Sunhwa's body continued to convulse. If you suspect that the possessed is afflicted by a ghost monster, all you need to do is ask them the question, who are you? Multiple times. There will definitely be a reaction. Eventually, they will answer, who they are. Who are you? Keg. If you ask them multiple times and they do not respond, then it's almost certain that they are not afflicted by a ghost monster. The third cause is the aftermath from a guardian's descent, but because descent wasn't a common occurrence, even Jackson could only guess what he thought might be the case. There are times when temporary symptoms similar to possession show up due to a guardian's descent. It has only been observed a few times on a global scale, and is said to disappear naturally on its own with time. When a descent occurred, not all players were affected by it. It wasn't like the guardian picked someone out to control their mind. It was basically something like a side effect from a descent. Side effect from a descent. It affected Sunhwa, and even affected me. Sponsored content. As expected of a guardian's descent. That was why I hadn't noticed something being off. I really couldn't deny it if you said this was just my mistake. But I did get the feeling I was indirectly under the influence of a guardian's ability and power. My hunch was probably correct. In any case, right now, Sunhwa was suffering from a side effect. Side effects don't affect people the same way. Some people get them, some people don't. Sunhwa was just unlucky and ended up manifesting that side effect. Geez, this girl. I put the spasming girl on my back. Her condition would settle on its own with time. I was relieved to see no one was nearby, since she would draw weird looks at the moment. I could feel her convulsing on my back. This is actually a good thing, I thought while moving forward. I might have gotten indirectly influenced, but it's still true that I failed to notice it. There was something I missed other than Sunhwa's condition being off, something directly related to Sunhwa. It's true that Sunhwa has genius-level talent. She had proven that as early as the tutorial. Sunhwa was a diamond in the rough who would shine more and more radiantly with every passing year. Even before all her talent plates were open, before her body was done growing, her growth speed and skills were already on par with guys like Yunseo and Yuhyun. In terms of talent alone, she might actually outstrip them by a mile. Once she was a little older and had a more proper evaluation done, her results might cause a huge uproar. It's possible she'll even be marked as having 67 talent plates. Considering the upper display limit for Korea's talent plate evaluation device was 67, it was possible she had an immeasurable level of genius. But even for such a genius, there was definitely a weakness. She's mentally weak. She was still a kid in her teens. No matter how remarkable her talent for tanking was, her mind wasn't as strong. She couldn't be good at everything. Her resilience against physical attacks is ridiculous, but she's weak to non-physical attacks. When I thought about it, it was obvious. Even with such a talent, she was a kid who had been reduced to tears of terror because of a baby goblin. If one's weakness is unknown, there's not much you can do. But if you knew, you could cover for it. It was actually good that I knew now. Where could you find a person who was perfect in every aspect? Take the Björn Gilsip, for instance. The man who became famous as the Spear Demon had terrible poison resistance, so he went wild buying all the poison resistance items. Thanks to the ruler of the plains, I was able to grasp a simple fact that I had missed. I should actually thank them. We'll need to invest in mental defense items. With that, she'll be perfect. I should also have her put more points into her willpower stat. Thanks to this, I've learned something important. I now had a better idea on how to nurture Sunhwa. Before I knew it, Sunhwa's convulsions had subsided. The descent side effects seemed to have mostly passed. She was murmuring something to herself, and when I craned my ear to hear, they were just meaningless mumbles. Fried chicken. Sponsored content. Hamburger. Pizza. Tteokbokki. Sundae. After listing a stream of foods, Sunhwa suddenly made a sound of utter bliss, going, "Hya." Her sleep talking didn't end there. She screamed a "Sho Tashta," and then suddenly came back to her senses. I couldn't see her since she was on my back, but if I had to guess, her eyes probably flew wide open. Gay. She flailed like she wanted to get down, so I simply let go. Thud. She flopped to the ground with a thud. For her, an impact like that wouldn't even sting. Her mind might be tofu, but her body was as sturdy as could be. Op-opa. Back to your senses? Remember everything? Sunhwa's face turned beet red. You don't need to be that embarrassed. She just suffered a descent side effect, that was all. It could happen to anyone. The redness of her face had even spread to her ears. In a small voice, she mumbled, "I'm on a diet." What was this girl going on about now? I don't eat that much. And? So the things I muttered about just now, I'm absolutely not saying I want to eat them. It's just, sleep talking. Yeah, something like sleep talking. The fact she could remember everything made it pretty unlikely that she was just sleep talking, but I decided not to mention that. I wasn't thinking about it at all. You're telling the truth, right? That seemed to reassure her. Her summary instantly changed a little. Summary. Slight Brokon denying their identity. Sunhwa spoke to me seriously, like she was trying to brainwash me. I'm not a pig. Sponsored content. I'm absolutely not a pig. Seriously, seriously. Denying their identity. I could see her summary all too clearly, but I didn't show it. Should I order fried chicken? FR fried chicken? Sunhwa's eyes widened like saucers, and she suddenly broke out into a blissful smile. Yeah, fried chicken. Want some? Sunhwa 0, fried chicken 1. Summary. Slight Brokon. The denying their identity part cleanly disappeared from her summary. All her embarrassment forgotten, she smiled brightly as she clamored, "You're going to buy 2 chickens, right? 1 per person, right? I'll be disappointed if you don't." Sunhwa was not the only one vulnerable to the allure of fried chicken. We've ordered half spicy, half regular. Nuna just stared indifferently at me. At least on the outside, the person sitting at the table didn't seem all that interested. Plus an extra soy sauce chicken on the house, which makes a total of 3 chickens, 1 per person. Nuna was crazy about soy sauce chicken. Not interested. My sister experienced almost losing me once. Perhaps because of that, she was always very alarmed whenever she heard about gates or dungeons appearing. The press must have made an uproar about the flashgate that appeared in the First Players Convention, as well as the Orcanthropes, so I could only imagine how anxious she must have been again. But it's half spicy, half regular, with a soy sauce chicken on top? Nuna, I can totally see the saliva going down your neck. Why's your hand trembling like that? It appeared that the members of my house had very capricious summaries. Food might be an even stronger form of mind control than possession to them. Summary. Tsunere tempted by fried chicken. Well, Tsunere tempted by fried chicken was better than devoted Tsunere, I guess. After all, I had received plenty of my sister's devotion in my past life. Are you buying? Of course. Then I'll help you out and eat it this time. Sponsored content. So why are your lashes quivering? How come your lips are curling up? And why are you gulping your drool? Is it because of eye of perception and observer's eye? Even without activating them on purpose, I could see my sister's expression in high resolution. My vision was very different from my past life. Even if I saw the same things, I could see more, and in greater detail. From the way she was sneaking into her bedroom, She was probably planning on paying for the chicken herself. Is it because of become a player? The formerly talentless me was now already in their early level 30s. I was walking shoulder to shoulder with heroes. I'd have to get through level 40 to know if I was an early bloomer. But for now, anyone would say that I was speeding along. And now, I can even eat fried chicken like this with my sisters. It would have been great if my mom could have joined us, too, but she would be coming in an hour or two. 2 hours, huh? Her return time wasn't 100% set in stone, so I was curious as to who would come first. I called my Nuna and Sunwa to the table. In a little bit, someone will probably come looking for me. Who? One of two possibilities. In any case, don't be too surprised, no matter who ends up coming. I informed this Tsunere older sister and Tofu mind little sister of mine in advance so they wouldn't be shocked silly. Just trust me and don't do anything. Okay? You trust me, right? Nuna gave me a dubious stare. Don't worry, I didn't go out and cause a mess somewhere. Sunwa, looking totally excited by the prospect of fried chicken, chirped, I trust you, Oppa. To the current Sunwa, I can eat chicken soon, was more important than my safety or her trust in me. I could almost see the thoughts of, that doesn't matter, I want to eat chicken soon, swimming around in her brain. Anyway. I glanced at the time. It was 6:40 p.m. Would my mom come first, or would they? While I was waiting, marks popped up over Duranji's head. At the same time, the doorbell rang. Someone had come to our house. I found myself grinning. So this is how they want to do it, huh? It was amusing. With this, my course of action was also set. Perhaps because Senia was streaming me, I heard a new notice. The Merchant of Venice is focusing on you. It wasn't my mom who came first. As I expected, the people who came to our house were the police. Chapter 92. Sponsored content. I asked over the intercom, who is it? The response I expected came over. This is the police. This is the home of Mr. Kim Hyukjin, correct? The police came, and I knew very well why. As they entered our apartment, Nuna gave me an indifferent stare, and I tried to smile to reassure her that everything was okay. Nuna, it's okay, don't worry and just stay put. Let me go take care of things real quick, and then we can eat fried chicken together. You really didn't cause a mess somewhere, right? I'm telling you, I didn't. This is, well, something like a big show of force. Go to your room for now. I'll take care of it, don't worry. If you've made a mess somewhere, you're dead. She was looking at me with distrust, with what appeared to be a little loathing. That was what her expression said, but I knew what she was actually feeling. State. Extreme worry. I could see it from her state, and I could feel her true feelings through eye of perception as well. She was terribly worried about me. It probably meant I was just that important to her. In any case, I turned my attention to the police. We must ask you to accompany us for a little bit. Just then, Senia appeared, her wings unfurled. My exclusive contracted streamer exuded absolute aloofness and beauty with her very presence. As soon as Senia revealed herself, the two policemen flinched. Naturally. They must know what Senia was. To them, she was probably something like an unknown being who looked different from humans and could suddenly appear out of thin air, transcending time and space, though that was actually just coming out of the transparent state. An almighty alien who could erase the life of one or two humans with a single swipe of her finger. As expected, they're scared. Be it policemen or detectives, they were reduced to mere puppies with their tails tucked between their legs in front of Senia. Guns didn't even work on her, and she wasn't human, so they couldn't enforce human laws on her, either. Let's go then, I said, walking forward. What an obvious little trick. I was well aware of why I was being taken to the police station. It was because of assault. I strangled Kim Taechin into unconsciousness. However, I knew he hadn't made charges against me, because he must still be out of it from the aftermath of the failed descent. That meant someone else had reported me to the police, and it was because of that person that the police took action so quickly. It's almost ridiculous how obvious this is. If things dragged on too long and I ended up not being able to eat fried chicken with my chicken-tempted older sister and my chicken-loving little sister, this little scenario wouldn't go over nicely. Song Kyeol. Sponsored content. The second place I would be meeting Song Kyeol would be the police station. There, we would have an intense talk. I arrived at the station, and a little time passed. There were none of the browbeating policemen I'd seen on TV here. Summary. Rod of the people experiencing love at first sight. Summary. Old bachelor blinded by beauty. Each and every summary was amusing. There was a guy who fell in love with Senia at first sight. One that was blinded by beauty. and one summary was even. Summary. Policewoman enlightened to a new world. The fact that her summary said, policewoman, instead of policeman, meant that person was very conscious of their gender. What new world? From the way she was sneaking glances at Senya, she almost seemed like a pubescent teenager in love. Well, it is peaceful, that's for sure. These people were simultaneously fearful of Senya and charmed by her beauty. Thanks to this terrifying yet awe-inspiring intermediate administrator, I wasn't subjected to much harassment. Guess Song Kyeol's plan is already off the tracks from the start. I guessed his plan. He probably intended on putting me in hot water, then coming in to save me like a knight in shining armor. That way, he would hold the higher ground in any future engagements or negotiations with me. His intentions were so blatantly clear. Even as the policemen interrogated me about my assault, they seemed to be waiting for someone. Observation is such a wonderful thing. I couldn't read their inner thoughts, but observation relayed a great deal of information to me. The quality and quantity of the information I received was different compared to other people. I can wait until my lawyer comes, yes? Yes, feel free. With Senya backing me, the policemen couldn't treat me roughly anyway, and they had their own intentions, so they just let me be. As a result, I was able to wait in peace. I whispered to Senya. Making me feel enough pressure before he makes a sufficiently heroic entrance should last about 40 minutes, don't you think? 40 minutes? Sponsored content. Yeah, it should be about 40 minutes. After making calculations of her own, Senya began to stream using a strange language I couldn't understand. The Merchant of Venice is watching with interest. The Whispering Devil focuses on the 40-minute time limit. And to my surprise, he really did appear after 40 minutes. Aya, fancy seeing you here, Mr. Third-Generation Chaebol Song Kyeol. That was easy? Was it because he was still inexperienced? I'd felt this for a while, but I felt like I could read Song Kyeol like an open book. In terms of gambling, my hand of cards was way better than his. I smiled. You've come, my lawyer. This was where I would make my decision. Would I move forward with the card called Song Kyeol, or would I discard it? Sungshin was a global conglomerate. In the modern day, money was power, and Sungshin commanded immense power in Korea. He didn't publicize Kim Hyukjin's existence to the media because Kim Hyukjin was a variable, and because right now, the most important fact the world had to know was that Taeguk Shield hunted the Orcanthropes, monsters invulnerable to modern weapons. That was what he told the media, but the whole incident left him feeling irked. Just what kind of guy is he? Kim Hyukjin, a subject of interest even to his grandfather, and a sovereign class player with the incredible ability to instantly put the Orcanthropes into a groggy state. I don't get him at all. He needed to know a little more about this enigma. The man's ability was desirable. If he could turn Kim Hyukjin into a subordinate, then he would, and if he couldn't, then he really did have to establish a working relationship. Otherwise, the man would have to be eliminated. For now, he decided to put Kim Hyukjin into his debt before their conversation together. He didn't release it to the mass media, but the scene where Kim Hyukjin assaulted Kim Taechin was clearly recorded from start to finish. Using that, he mobilized the police. Let's see if he can be that relaxed even in the police station. His opponent was a regular person. Certain that Kim Hyukjin wouldn't be resting easy in the police station, he intentionally waited a little. He'll probably be anxious enough to bow and scrape. As a Korean, he should know how much authority and power he, Song Kyeol, held. He truly had enough power to make a little assault charge fly away with a single word. To begin with, the police wouldn't have even gotten themselves involved in a matter between players if Kyeol hadn't instigated it. He entered the police station, and was greeted with someone's voice. You've come, my lawyer. To his shock, Kim Hyukjin looked incredibly relaxed. Kyeol had the bad feeling that things had gone awry from the start. Ah. He saw her right away. The intermediate administrator, Senya. A woman possessing angelic beauty that didn't seem to belong in this world. Even though he's not even playing. She appeared in the police station? Was that intended by Kim Hyukjin? Sponsored content. Did he make Senya do as he wanted? But how could a mere player make an intermediate administrator act as they wished? According to Song Kyeol's common sense, that was impossible. It couldn't happen. He was lucky. That was the only way he could interpret this. That attitude, like he knew I'd be coming. Kyeol had already lost once in a battle of wits. Even so, he was the one with the advantage. But the words that came next challenged that thought. Kim Taechin is in a coma, yes? That's because of dissent. I stopped a guardian descent that was about to happen. If that descent had actually occurred, Hyukjin shrugged. We wouldn't be talking here like this. Why? Both of us would be dead. Senia took a step forward. I, an intermediate administrator, confirm the veracity of that statement. Song Kiol turned to the investigator who had been interrogating me. Would it be alright if I had a private conversation with Mr. Kim Hyukjin for a moment? Wow, was that really okay? I was amazed that he suddenly requested a private meeting. The funny thing was that the private meeting was actually permitted. Even though he's not a policeman? He's not even a lawyer. Well, whatever, we were taken to a room within the station. Just my guess, but I doubt this won't be recorded. If it is, even better. I started talking first. Did you come to help me? Yes, I did. Should I be saying thank you? That is something for you to decide. I sat down. Senia had returned to her transparent state, but I could feel her presence. The Merchant of Venice continues to focus. After I choked Kim Taechin and made him black out, when I didn't see myself on the news or hear any mention of my name on the radio in the taxi, I knew for a fact that this situation would occur. I'll start then. I raised the index finger of my left hand. First, the comatose Kim Taechin cannot report me. Second, if so, someone else did. Third, that someone has the power to make the police move this swiftly and without delay. Sponsored content. With 3 fingers outstretched on my left hand, I started counting on my right hand now. First, the appearance of the variable Kim Hyukjin was not publicized to the media. Second, the variable called Kim Hyukjin does not desire becoming known to the media. Third, in the end, Kim Hyukjin was not publicized. I stretched out all my fingers and shrugged. What could these things mean? Song Kiol's eye twitched. What are you trying to say? A person who can perfectly control the media. Someone capable of moving government forces. I'm here right now because that person wanted it. And you think that person is me? I didn't say it was you, Mr. Song Kiol. It is you, and everyone knows it. But I didn't say that. I simply smiled with an air of calm. After watching his reaction for a moment, I continued. There must be someone out there who wants to have the higher ground in a negotiation with me. I have come here to help you. I find your remarks very unpleasant. How did you know I was in the police station? This man seemed as lofty and unreachable as the heavens in my previous life. But now, I felt like I was dealing with a child. It was really amazing. So much had changed after coming to the past. The police do not like to involve themselves in matters between players. Why? Because there are intermediate administrators in the middle. And yet they moved this rapidly? I would guess they had no choice even though they didn't want to. Because there was pressure from up top. I grinned. But alright, let's just say I don't know who the source of that pressure was. This was enough for a show of my hand. There was no need to shout, "You're the criminal," outright. What I was going for was just, your scheme is dogshit. I also don't intend on resenting it, either. For the briefest moment, uncertainty flashed over Song Kiol's face. For the briefest moment, there was a trace of panic. He's wavering nicely. This was the negotiation table. A business table between me and this third-generation Chaebol scion. A man whose name would fly high as the guildmaster of Taeguk Shield, but would still lose the battle of inheritance to his younger sister, Song Junghye. After all, it was a pretty decent choice using the cards that could pressure me. If I were a moron who didn't know anything, that is. But I didn't say that. In business, everything was calculated on profit and loss alone. For a moment, Song Kiol made an expression of uncertainty before quickly schooling his countenance into expressionlessness. It was just that those cards were ineffective on me. My cards were just a little better than his. My field of vision was a little wider than his, that was all. I had completely seized the initiative. Shall we start our conversation? There must be a lot you want to ask. I'd like this to be a useful time for me. No, for us. To be more precise, my test for Song Kiol began. Chapter 93. Sponsored content. In a single-patient general hospital room, Byun Gilsip perched on a chair. His gaze moved to the bed. Ha, this absolute dunce. For some reason, Kim Taechin had turned monster-like and then was quickly dispatched. And via a back choke, no less. A combat class player letting a non-combat class grab them by the back of the neck? That wasn't just a disgrace. It was utterly humiliating. If it were me, I woulda just bit my tongue and ended it. Gilsip was only here because the guildmaster, a freaking third-generation Chaebol, told him to keep a good eye on this guy. How can you call yourself a combat class with shit skills like that? You might as well eat shit, dude. Byun Gilsip had watched Kim Taechin and Kim Hyukjin's fight on the 12th floor earlier. He was one of the people who were able to read Hyukjin's movements. It's cause you were so fucking slow that you got slammed by a non-combat class, idiot. He sighed like he was frustrated. He was confident that if it had been him, he wouldn't have lost so pathetically. Bro, you gotta just loosen up there, and then move fast like whoosh and go wham wham. Like this, dude, gah, so frustrating, just like me, wham, wham, like this. He was sure that if it were him, he could have easily taken Hyukjin down. He believed in his spearmanship. All that weight you had on him, wasted. The heck was that? And when are you gonna wake the hell up? How long do I have to stay here babysitting your ass? He clicked his tongue as he continued to cuss out the unconscious Kim Taechin, calling the man an idiot to top all idiots. But just then, someone came into the hospital room. Thank ya. It was a white-haired grandma. Her face was full of lines that showed the passage of many years. She grabbed Gilsup's hand, looking quite composed. Thank ya, sonny. Thank ya for savin' our Taechin. Thank ya so much. When she bent 90 degrees, Gilsup hurried to bend 100 degrees with extreme alacrity. Goodness, it's nothing, Granny. This fellow fought really courageously and well. We were able to clear the flashgate because of him, too. He is a hidden hero. The Gilsup who had been cussing out Taechin moments ago was nowhere to be seen. He gazed warmly at the grandma's hands grabbing his and spoke with a very sincere attitude. I owe my life to his efforts, Granny. Don't worry too much, he'll get up soon. Our Taeguk shield will do its best for his recovery. And you don't have to worry about the hospital fee. They spoke for a while. After some time, Gilsup's face turned bright red. She wasn't his granny, but his mom? He had called a mom a granny. That was no different from telling her, you look really fucking old. Cold sweat ran down his back. Today was a really tough day. I would be an even bigger piece of shit if I apologized now, right? Sponsored content. The man who would one day become famous as the Spear Demon was forced to undergo a very difficult night. At around the same time as when Byun Gilsup was undergoing hardship, Kim Hyukjin and Song Kyeol were conversing. Shall we start our conversation? There must be a lot you want to ask. I'd like this to be a useful time for me. No, for us. Kyeol definitely heard it. That, for me, no, for us. A slip of the tongue? Had Hyukjin unintentionally misspoken? No, it wasn't a mistake. When he arrived at the police station, he was forced to completely renew his evaluation of Kim Hyukjin. He had devised this situation, but it actually felt like he was the one getting played like a fiddle. A trick to unsettle me. Or to sound me out. He was sure of it. Oh right, said Hyukjin. I should remind you that this is, of course, being streamed. She is transparent right now, but Senya is transmitting this footage to the Guardians. The Guardians were watching. It was a veiled warning not to do anything foolish. That was how Kyeol heard it. Kim Hyukjin looked extremely relaxed. I thought there was a lot you wanted to know about me. We have time, so I'll answer all your questions. Please, ask away. Kyeol nodded. For now, it was true that he was getting pushed back. He had also lost the initiative. However, since he could have his questions answered, the situation wasn't that terrible. First of all, I need an explanation about the sovereign class. Hyukjin gave him a simple explanation. It was a class that allotted roles based on every player's ability and maximized their skills and efficiency. That's the kind of class it is. You acted as if you knew that I would come to the police station. Are you a precognitive dream user? Hyukjin shrugged. I have a similar ability. Ah. Taeguk Shield also had a precognitive dream user. Hyukjin grinned, saying, Taeguk Shield has a person like that too, right? Someone with precognitive dream. That is a secret. I saw through Guildmaster Song Kyeol's eye of truth. Do you think I wouldn't know about a precognitive dream user? What? Sponsored content. It might even be that you were tardy to the players' convention because of them. You are overthinking it. Shall I try guessing the name of the precognitive dream user? That person is Ham So-hyun, right? He didn't say that. Kyeol flinched. For a very brief moment, he felt a chill. It was almost as if everything about him and Taeguk Shield was being observed. It was actually more scary that the name, Ham So-hyun, was left unsaid. It felt like Hyukjin didn't say it on purpose. Is it a trick? It was difficult to guess how much this man knew and how much of what he said was the truth. That made this conversation all the more confusing and difficult. This 20-year-old youth in front of him almost made him feel like he was talking to his grandfather. I'm joking. Even for me, I can't know things in such detail. You are more timid than I expected. He kept feeling like he was ensnared in Hyukjin's web. Kyeol pulled himself together and moved to the next question. How did you suppress the orcs? I wasn't the one who suppressed them, but Taeguk Shield. Allow me to rephrase the question. How did you put them into a groggy state? It is one of my special skills. That was a lie. Hyukjin was only able to use the spell of submission because the Whispering Devil had helped him. However, he didn't show all his cards truthfully. He made an idle remark. You can't try to uncover all my trade secrets. There has to be give and take. I will only say that it is one of my special skills. Keol continued with what he considered a trump question. I heard that you treated my youngest sibling almost threateningly. From what I hear, you even wrapped up our grandfather in your denouncement. Ah, is that how it was told? The truth was the truth. There was no use in talking to the underlings. Hyukjin had dealt a direct blow to the grandson so that his message would reach President Song Kyung without a filter. That wasn't what I meant. You seem to be confident you can deal with the aftermath. The aftermath? Sponsored content. Sitting with his legs crossed, Hyukjin looked insively Song Keol. The guildmaster of Taeguk Shield still had a long way to go. That was why he would later lose to the second oldest grandchild, Song Junghye. Do you think that President Song would have sent his beloved grandson to me without any reason whatsoever? Keol had a weird feeling. It felt like Kim Hyukjin knew his grandfather very well. Something was weird. It was like Hyukjin knew his grandfather better than he did. For now, he decided to listen. What's more, an ordinary little kid who holds no position in the company and no responsibilities. That's because Jinchul was insisting so much. He is not the kind of person who would simply give in to his youngest grandson's begging. He only makes it seem like that. That, too, must be an intentional part of his act. It was likely true that he did love his youngest grandson. Jinchul was a grandson he received in his old age. There was no doubt that he had a special fondness for the boy. But not to the point of being unable to separate personal matters from business. Try to see through the president's intent. He wasn't just convinced by a kid's cute tricks. He wanted to see how I would handle Song Jinchul. Adding to that, I'm sure his desire to hear about the situation without a filter was part and parcel. I merely acted in accordance with what he wanted. There was no aftermath to consider in the first place. Song Keol's body flinched almost imperceptibly. The new perspective Hyukjin showed him gave him a slight shock. You speak as if you know our president very well, he barely managed. Though as far as I know, you have only met him once. There are things you only need to see once to figure out. Hyukjin simply fixed Keol with a leveled look. It was a very small clue, but he didn't miss it. He called him president instead of grandfather? It seemed this grandson felt a certain level of distance from his grandfather. After a slight pause, Hyukjin continued staring at Keol. In other words, do you think that President Song wouldn't know that you've come to see me? He didn't spell it out. If Keol could realize that on his own, Hyukjin planned on cooperating with him, to a certain extent. To be more precise, he would move forward with bringing the guild under Song Keol's leadership, Taeguk Shield, under him. He has to realize at least that much to have the qualifications of a business partner. If he was so clueless he couldn't figure this much out, there was no need to work with him. Hyukjin would discard him without reserve. It was because of Song Keol's wealth and power, as well as his character that was considered quite decent even in the future, that Hyukjin gave him a chance. Keol had to be a much better choice than the blood and iron witch Song Junghye. Well, he's a third-gen chaebol, after all. He had things Hyukjin didn't have. Song Keol and Taeguk Shield had access to nearly unlimited wealth and power. If they used each other and gave each other what was owed, then they would be able to establish a win-win relationship. Thankfully, Song Keol wasn't a fool. He understood Hyukjin's words and actions. If his grandfather had observed a situation involving Hyukjin via his youngest brother, then what about now? Grandfather is watching me, too. Sponsored content. It was very simple, but it enlightened him. Actually, Keol's main interest wasn't really Taeguk Shield. Taeguk Shield was merely a tool and a stepping stone to solidify his position in the succession battle. His true goal was to be acknowledged by his grandfather and ascend to the position of the next president. This wasn't me testing Kim Hyukjin, but grandfather testing me. Hyukjin read that thought. It seems that we can communicate more properly now. I would guess that the way the president sees you will be affected by the result of your negotiation with me and how your conversation with me progresses. Song Keol earnestly asked, I apologize, but are you really 20? Yes. Would you like to see my ID card? No, there's no need for that. How could a 20-year-old act like this? From his actions and speech, it would be believable if someone said Hyukjin was a 60-year-old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Keol decided not to go around in circles. Hyukjin already knew exactly what the opposite party wanted and was aiming for, and was acting accordingly. Keol understood perfectly well that Hyukjin was a level higher than him. I'm not the fiddler in this situation. He came totally convinced he was the fiddler, but he was actually the fiddle. If so, going around in circles was meaningless. He decided to advance directly. What do you want? $100,000 per member of our team. And all the items that were dropped earlier. I have already promised you that. I will prepare it immediately. Useless oil items also came out, but do you want those as well? I believe I asked for everything, did I not? Understood. I will give you everything. He didn't linger on that. Kyeol already knew their basic personal details. Kim Hyukjin, Kim Sunhwa, Seo Yoo-hyun, Choi Sung-ji-yu, Shin Yunseo, Jo Sung-hyun. A total of 6 people. $600,000. It was that much money. Song Kyeol could easily handle that much on his own. He inquired again, beyond that, I am asking what you want in exchange for maintaining a cooperative relationship between my Taeguk Shield and your team. Only then did Hyukjin flash him a smile of satisfaction. It seems we can get to the true matter at hand. As expected of the Guildmaster of Taeguk Shield, Song Kyeol was still one of the people who wasn't eliminated in the future and continued to push forward on the front lines as the leader of one of the world's preeminent guilds. He did lose to his younger sister, but he wasn't a total idiot. No, in all actuality, Song Kyeol belonged to the elite upper group. It was just a little interesting that the person leading such an elite by the nose was Kim Hyukjin. Chapter 94. Sponsored content. Once a celebrity took off, they could rake in an enormous amount of wealth and fame. In exchange, they had to give up on their private life. Wealth and fame versus private life. Where there was light, there was shadow. Only by being popular in the media could you acquire wealth and fame, and in the process, you ended up forfeiting most of your private life and freedom. You win some, you lose some. So basically, Taeguk Shield can take all the fame and glory. I don't need that kind of thing. My eyes were solely on the practical gains. I didn't need the troublesome interest of the public. But I still wanted the benefits that came with such fame. Normally, that would be impossible, but not if I worked with Taeguk Shield. Might as well pick out only the good stuff, right? The method where I could have my cake and eat it too was to put Taeguk Shield in the front and operate in the back. So you want to put Taeguk Shield on the outside and take the actual profits? That's right, Bullseye. Of course, my teammates will do their best to cooperate with Taeguk Shield. We can meet later to decide the particulars. How favorable would those particulars be? That would be an enjoyable conundrum. It's win-win for us both. I would put Taeguk Shield on the outside and get the practical benefits. Taeguk Shield would get our help and gain the fame and power the guild always wanted. They would become the heroes of Korea. That had always been Sungshin's true aim with Taeguk Shield. The guild's success would have an enormous effect on improving Sungshin's image. Through that, Guildmaster Song Kyeol would take a big step forward in the fight for succession. You would be able to win the high ground in your competition with your particularly strong competitor, your second oldest sibling. You've even seen through that much? Song Kyeol must have never imagined that he would have such a conversation with an ordinary person, and in the police station, no less. I don't intend on becoming a guild member of Taeguk Shield, but I will think of your guild as an ally of the highest priority. Kyeol had completely lost the initiative to me. If that was enough to bruise his pride, then he wouldn't develop any further. He would only grow if he viewed this situation as a learning experience and got something out of it. What will you do? I would be happy to see him ask the one question that really hit bullseye. Just why did you insist on Taeguk Shield? With this much insight, you could have gotten another partner. Is it really only because you disliked the public interest and find it troublesome? It's a little difficult to understand if that is your only reasoning. If he sent me such an appropriate line of questioning, I would give Song Kyeol a few more brownie points. I have one question. Fire away. Is that really all you want? A simple cooperative relationship? Judging by the current situation, you have already seen through us. You have far more information than we do and have the skills to stand in a far more dominant position. Your assessment is sound. Sponsored content. Yes, that was exactly right. Then there's a question you need to ask me, isn't there? I gave him some more time. But is it really because you dislike the public's interest? Currently, I find it a little difficult to understand why you are refusing fame and glory. Good, well done. It was a pretty good question. I decided to reward him with a little more information. That is in part related to my class. The one I have a contract with does not like to see me acting in the front. Actually, the nameless guardian didn't particularly prohibit me from doing so. They simply observed in silence. Even so, this kind of gesture was necessary. All things considered, my guardian was my biggest customer, my VVIP. It was good to show at least this much goodwill. And it's an explanation that can convince him. After some time, his summary changed. Summary. Enlightened third-generation Chable. He still had a long way to go. He needed to become an enlightened guildmaster, not an enlightened, third-generation chaebol. Well, he's still a beginner. He had performed well enough to deserve some leniency. Will you agree to a cooperative relationship of the highest priority? I asked. Of course, it would be a verbal agreement for now. We'll have to discuss the particulars later. A spoken contract was non-binding. Naturally, there had to be a written contract. I was saying this to see Song Kyo's guts and willingness to cooperate. In this situation, where I was the superior, and he was the inferior, it might very well be a bold move for him to decisively accept a contract with me without concrete clauses. No, it was definitely a bold move. He didn't know what exactly I would demand. Well then, what will you do? He had barely scraped by in my test. All things considered, Taeguk Shield Song Kyo was still way better than the Blood and Iron Queen. Queen sounded nice, but she was actually more often called witch. It was my personal judgment that working with Song Kyo was much better than working with Song Junghye, the woman who had wielded nearly absolute power after President Song Kyo-young passed away. I didn't know what kind of influence this decision would have on the future, but in any case, it was far more favorable for me. Answer me. I gave the inferior party more time. Shortly afterwards, Song Kyo gave me his response. I agree, he continued calmly, though I do get the feeling that I was dragged along by you the whole day. At least he knew. It was a very educational day. Sponsored content. He seemed more humble than how I had judged him to be when I first saw him on the 12th floor. Next time, I will look a little more broadly and seize the initiative from you, Mr. Kim Hyukjin. That's exactly what I want. That's right, you, the Guildmaster of Taeguk Shield, need to become a little more smart and wily so that I, your partner, can have an easier time. With a slightly more relaxed expression, Song Kyo said, shall we leave, then? I have already arranged to have you escorted back in comfort to your home. Thank you. I was thankful, but I wasn't done talking yet. If I were you, Guildmaster Song Kyo, I would have made a different proposal. I decided to give Song Kyo, a man considered to be relatively kind and honest for a third-generation chaebol, a little tip. Pardon? The president aside, isn't it true that both Guildmaster Song Kyo and the other members of Taeguk Shield still do not know much about me? That's true, but he knew that I had choked Kim Taechin to unconsciousness, put the Orcanthropes into a groggy state, and had a sovereign class. I'm sure the players of Taeguk Shield are particularly skilled people. That was a no-brainer, since each of them had been carefully selected. So how do you intend on explaining to them that Taeguk Shield and I have established a tight-knit cooperative relationship? Do you think you can convince them? To them, I am an unknown player who never even gave a proper explanation of how I subdued the Orcanthropes. The higher one's skill, the more likely it was that they had strong pride. Knowing that very well, I gave the Guildmaster another push. There are definitely players from Taeguk Shield who were able to read my movements. If so, there must be players who boasted that they could beat me. State. Awed, surprised, slight fear. I could tell from his state. I had clearly hit the bullseye with a single prod. I decided to prod a little more. Sponsored content. For example, the player wielding the spear. Or the player who uses poison. You simply continue to surprise me. In the end, Song Kyo acknowledged everything I said, which was far better than not acknowledging the truth of my words and feigning ignorance. I decided to throw him another tip. If you are unable to seize full control of Taeguk Shield, your grandfather will be disappointed. That was actually Song Kyo's biggest immediate issue, the issue he had to settle before all else. He had to first turn Taeguk Shield into his loyal hands and feet. Only then would he be acknowledged by his grandfather and have a favorable position in the future fight for succession. I truly cannot believe you are really 20. There was nothing he could do even if he didn't believe it. I, too, had no idea that I was this capable. I thought I was an idiot because I kept failing the civil service exam. But looking at it now, that didn't seem to be true. I surprised myself. I scratched his itch a little more. To prevent the Guildmaster from being in an awkward spot, I will gladly accept a test. What? He really needed me to hold his hand from start to finish, huh? There was a lot to teach him. If I were you, I would have proposed a test. So come on, say it with your own mouth. That way, you can look more justified in front of your guild members, right? I'll do you a solid and simply accept. I spelled it out more concretely. For example, something like a PvP. A PvP? But you are. That's right, I am a non-combat class. My specialty isn't combat. So in other words, what kind of influence do you think a sovereign class player who could win against a combat class player would have in their specialty field? Was that enough for him to finally get it? If I were to tell you I could even prove my playing abilities as a sovereign, what would you do? I would prove my outstanding abilities my own way, and Song Kiel would prove his discernment his own way. And what do you think the evaluation would be of the guildmaster who was the first to recognize and actively approach the player who proved his abilities? After a short moment, Song Kiel spoke with a serious expression. Please allow me to test you. The test will be a PvP match. As for your opponent, I will choose a player from Taeguk Shield and inform you at a later time. While saying that, he snuck glances at me like he was scared I might be displeased or offended. Of course not. You did well. This is how you do it. Keep going like this in the future. You finally seem more like the guildmaster of Taeguk Shield. You've gotta do well so that I'll wanna cooperate again with you in the future, dude. I accept the test. Sponsored content. Thank you. It would be best if you were to bring up a reasonable proposal like this first next time. For the briefest moment, Song Kiel's eye twitched. I will keep that in mind. He wasn't simply unhappy, his summary changed. Summary. Third generation Chable who met his teacher. That was a pretty decent change, wasn't it? One day passed. My opponent would be the future spear demon, Byun Gilsip. It went without being said that the Guardians were also told about the PvP match. It was one of the types of content they went wild for. PvP, huh? A PvP against the spear demon. Rather than nervousness, I felt excitement. It should be fun. The day of the match was just around the corner. It would happen tomorrow. A simple frontal duel would be a bit risky. I didn't think I would be defeated even in a frontal battle, but I wouldn't be able to show an overwhelming difference in skill. The opponent was the future spear demon. He would be a far stronger PvPer than the brown bear Kim Taechin. I have to show them an overwhelming difference in skill. Then, Guildmaster Song Kiel would have a justification, and he would be able to show his grandfather that his discernment was correct. And considering the days of cooperation ahead of us, it was best to show overwhelming strength. Even better if I could prove my entire party's strength, not just my own. Then I guess, that's the method I'll have to use. There was a method that would allow me, a non-combat class player, to win against the combat class player Byun Gilsip with an overwhelming difference in skill, and that method wasn't far away. Time to get overgeared. Chapter 95. Sponsored content. There was a saying that went like this. Know thy enemy and know thyself. If you know your enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. I already knew a lot about the spear demon Byun Gilsip. It was believed that even Shin Yunseo, one of the strongest Korean PvPers, had to be on her toes when PvPing with Byun Gilsip. Only a tiny few think so, but there were people who put Byun Gilsip above her. In PvP, a match between players, there were countless variables. The battle could go a million different ways depending on how you utilized your opponent's weakness, timing, how quickly you could read your opponent's plan, the element and terrain of the field you were fighting on, how your condition was that day, etc. There were countless variables, and you couldn't always win. That was the reason why Shin Yunseo wasn't called the strongest Korean PvPer, but one of the strongest Korean PvPers. Because victory or loss is decided by many variables and your luck. At least for this match, I could control those variables and create my luck. To start, I got an item from Sung Hyun. Wind Shoes +1. Shoes imbued with the blessing of wind. Dramatically increases one's affinity with the wind element, bestowing a synergistic effect when using wind attribute foot techniques or movement skills. However, a full pair of 2 shoes must be worn for that function to apply. Attribute, wind. Agility +2. Grade, rare. Level restriction, 25. Special skill, can use imaginary running start. Equip restriction, wind attribute class. If I used the special skill imbued in the wind shoes, I'd be able to fight a slightly more favorable ranged battle. Sung Hyun asked, you just equipped the wind shoes, right? Yeah, I did, just now. He had an expression of extreme dubiousness that I didn't quite get. After a moment, he seemed convinced of something. Why do you ask? I wasn't sure, but you really can equip them after all. I quickly understood what Sung Hyun meant. Come to think of it. Even I had to admit it was a little bewildering. My eyes were drawn to one part of the item description. Equip restriction. Wind attribute class. It was clearly written in black and white that only a wind attribute class could equip them. So how was it that I could wear the shoes? One conjecture I could come up with was that the Observer class was a higher grade class with a bigger scope, and the Wind attribute fell under its umbrella. Sponsored content. The Sovereign class seems to be a class that includes a great number of things. To be precise, it wasn't Sovereign, but Observer. If you think about it, maybe you can equip them because you have a kind of null attribute class. Maybe. His words had some sense to them. Even I didn't know everything about the Observer class. It was indeed possible that it had an attribute that took precedence over all other attributes. To borrow Sung Hyun's turn of phrase, a null attribute. Even then, it's a little hard to accept. It was the same for me. I couldn't quite wrap my head around it, either. I just went to put them on, and they were on. Since I couldn't say that, I just kept my mouth shut. I'm sure that you have a secret of your own. Sung Hyun actually seemed uplifted by this revelation. His eyes were filled with a sort of longing. The look was a little too intense for me, so I slightly averted my gaze. Let's just inspect the items. I also checked the new Great Orc Warrior item I got this time. I'd added the Great Orc Warrior's gloves to the set via the bet with the Herdsman of Las Vegas. Partial set effect. Defends against a physical attack the wearer cannot handle, limited to once per day. However, the attacker's level must not exceed level 35. If their level exceeds 35, a damage reduction effect will be triggered depending on the attack's power. With the addition of the Great Orc Warrior's gloves to the partial set, the upper level limit for the complete nullification effect went up from 30 to 35. Yun Gilsup's level 30. I would be able to nullify at least one attack from him. So it was time to go to the next item. After parting with Sung Hyun, I met up with Yunseo next. We picked a coffee shop in Yeonam-dong, a neighborhood in Seoul. She looks cute in casual clothes. In her casual clothes, she looked like any university student and gave off a refreshing, even lively, appearance. Maybe because I was 30 on the inside, I saw her as cute rather than pretty. Sitting on the other side of the table, Yunseo gave me a smile that reached her eyes. What the, is this a date? Have you finally decided to see me as a woman? This smile had consigned countless men to the fate of Sword Empress Crushers, but it didn't make me think much. Just, oh, she's cute. Of course, I hadn't called her to have a date. Lend me your sword once. My sword? Yunseo seemed troubled for a bit. I'm not sure I can lend it to you. It was probably an artifact bestowed by the true master of the heavenly demonic mountain. Since this was the early game, it would be nothing compared to the Demon Blade Asura she would use in the future, but it would still have the highest attack power out of all the sword items I could get my hands on right now. The sword's name was Asura. Sponsored content. The future Sword Empress' beloved sword, Asura. Asura was the king of the Asura realm, also called the world of chaos. It also meant he was the king of ghosts. That was why Asura was sometimes called a ghost blade, sometimes a demon blade. It was an artifact of the highest level that had even won the title Sword Among Swords. I remember the way Shin Yunseo looked when she swept through the Battle of the Maldives. The video documenting Shin Yunseo's performance had set a huge new YouTube record of 500 million views. In any case, considering there were less than 10 artifacts deserving the name Sword Among Swords in the entire world before I regressed, Asura was a named blade that ranked within the global top 10, at least in the sword category. After a long moment of intense contemplation, Yunseo opened her mouth. If I let you borrow this, will you go on a date with me? It seemed I needed to make things clear to her. Yunseo was obviously a pretty woman, but she wasn't my type. I didn't know why, I just couldn't see her as a woman. I'm sorry, but you're not my type. But will you go on a date with me though? I said you're not my type? Yunseo's smile actually widened. I told her she wasn't my type, so why was she even happier? Do you always only wear clothes that are your type, eat food that's your type, and watch movies that are your type? You don't. Her summary changed. Summary. Woman blazing with determination. The dreaded wife disappeared and a new keyword, determination, was formed. Even swordswoman disappeared, replaced by woman. At least in this moment, she wasn't the swordswoman Shin Yunseo, but the woman Shin Yunseo. Determination? She smiled brightly at me. My mum says that there isn't a tree out there that won't go down after 10 swings. She balled her hands into fists, pumping herself up. If you don't go down after 10 swings, I'll give up 100%. How about it? No matter how I looked at her, she seemed serious. Just lend me your sword. You've promised me a date, okay? Yunseo lent me her sword. When I took a look at it, my mouth dropped wide open. Oi, what's this? What do you mean, what's this? I thought you wanted to borrow it? The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain also gave permission. The Shin Yunseo who once rejoiced over a quality iron sword was long gone. She had this? I almost ended up rubbing my eyes in disbelief. Why does she already have Asura? It looked very different from the Asura I remembered. I opened up the item description. Asura, growth type, fully sealed. Sponsored content. The named blade the heavenly demon has bestowed upon his chosen successor. A legendary weapon made by smelting the heavenly demon's vital key, heavenly demonic mountain spirit key, magic pearl of a dragon. Grade, transcendent. Attack power, 40 to 63, currently sealed. Additional effects. Disabled. 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 30% offensive innate ability damage amplification. Can be freely modified to any shape of blade. Special note. In a fully sealed state, not all of its strength can be drawn upon. A fully sealed state, that was why the majority of its additional effects were disabled. On top of that, it was a growth item. I see now, Asura was a growth item. The more Yunseo grew, the stronger this artifact would become. It was even transcendent grade. There were rumors that the transcendent existed and the top rankers were equipped with those transcendent items, but it was my first time confirming it with my own eyes. Transcendent items really do exist. It was said that the top rankers had a world of their own, the so-called world above. A world that ordinary people didn't know about and could never hope to reach. It seemed that was really true. But seriously, why did an item of a grade this ridiculous even exist in the early game? There were 8 frickin' additional effects currently shown. Even though most of the effects are disabled and the attack power is also greatly weakened. Even despite that, it was an extremely outstanding item. Of the items in my possession, the one with the highest attack power was Mandra's Greatsword. Considering that Mandra's Greatsword had 18 to 22 attack power, you could say this was one hell of a sword. What a jackpot. My plan to get overgeared and give myself the item halo was going way better than I thought. The formal name was the DMC Lucentia Tower, but it was normally called the Player Center. Even the taxi drivers didn't know where Lucentia Tower was, but they knew the Player Center. Sponsored content. In any case, I headed to the Players Association with my party, the Player Center where the first convention had been held on the 12th floor. A space for PvPing had been arranged on the roof. I found the choice of location mind-boggling. They really have no fucking clue. It didn't matter now because we were in the beginner period, but once we got into the mid-game, indoor PvP was extremely dangerous. One misstep, and there could be significant damage to the building. Normally, PvP was done in specially made fields, or in open areas like clearings. The players could even fall off. This misinformed choice was made because the concept of PvP still wasn't full-fledged. Anyway, our PvP today would be private, by my request. No need to make Taeguk Shield's smackdown public. Taeguk Shield needed to be heroes in the minds of the people. In light of our partnership, I wanted to protect their image. However, the other parties seemed to have a different understanding of my request. A woman in tight-fitting black clothes that revealed every curve of her beautiful body with long, flowing, black hair that contrasted sharply with a snow-white face was sneering at us. Her name was Cheon Suji. Poison Witch, Cheon Suji. State. Ridicule, slight contempt, desire to win. There was another Taeguk Shield Guild member standing next to her, a considerably handsome man with dyed blonde hair. This man, who I remembered as having quite a lot of female fans but also many scandals, was named Gong Jinhoon. Nickname, Golden Priest. State. Regret, pity, slight expectation. They were staring at me with ridicule or regret. Most of the 7 Taeguk Shield Guild members here were the same. The reason why I asked for a private PvP was to save Byun Gilsup's face, not mine. They were clearly misunderstanding my intent. It seemed they thought that I feared my immediate and pathetic destruction and therefore asked for a private PvP. The Guildmaster of Taeguk Shield and I shared a simple greeting. Song Kyeol's gaze is strangely shifting to Cheon Suji. It was impossible to tell with the physical eye. I couldn't really put it in words, but his invisible gaze, his attention, was on Cheon Suji. I could guess the reason without much difficulty. My first opponent won't be Gilsup, but Suji. The poison witch Cheon Suji. By the looks of it, this woman was going to try a little trick on me, in a way that couldn't quite be called a PvP. She probably had a trifling scheme up her sleeve. I smiled readily. That's right, this is what you should do. You should try every little trick in your book. Only then will you be qualified to work with me. I waited a little, and sure enough, Cheon Suji came up to me. I would be able to gain at least one thing from her approach. A thing that would be very useful in the Plum Blossom Gate, the Centipede Cave. Suji had an item that I had to acquire before we went into the Centipede Cave. The first step begins now. Sponsored content. Max Talent Player. Chapter 96. Sponsored content. I took a look at Cheon Suji. Player. Name, Cheon Suji. Age, 27. Level, 29. Class, Poison Shaman. Guardian, Soundless Serpents. Innate ability, Lust Venom Finger. State, ridicule, slight contempt, desire to win. Disposition, sadistic, erotic, queen. Summary, queen chasing strength. The disposition, state, summary only show the most representative and can change according to the situation. Because Eye of Perception's proficiency is not high enough, viewing more detailed information is impossible. In the 3 months while I was in the special hidden piece, most of the top players hit level 30. Actually, leveling up to 30 was relatively easy. It was just that there were a ton of players who weren't able to push through the hell phase that was level 30 to 40 and fell apart after reaching the limits of their talent. In any case, level 29 at this point in time puts her at the top. Her guardian was the Soundless Serpents. Not much was known about them other than their exclusive sponsorship of Cheon Suji. They only rarely sent the Guardian is interested, or Guardian is watching, notices that were so common. Mr. Kim Hyukjin, there's something I'd like to ask before the PvP match. Feel free. Song Kyeol smoothly stepped aside, like he and Cheon Suji had arranged this ahead of time. She asked, why did you ask specifically for a private PvP? This would be a good opportunity to become famous. She looked me up and down. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, almost like she had found a tasty piece of meat. The look in her eyes was strangely provocative, the kind of ambiguous gaze that made a man's heart thump. I didn't really want to publicize it. I didn't want to show the world how their team, my business partner, was crushed by a non-combat class player. It seems you already know it will be a thorough thrashing. Yes. Not me, but him. Byun Gilsup was the one who would get thrashed. Are you a masochist by nature? What compelled a non-combat class to go into a PvP with a combat class? And one from Taeguk Shield, no less. I admire your courage and backbone. It's the sort of look I like to see. Cheon Suji licked her red lips. Combined with the look in her eyes, she exuded an extremely ambiguous feel. It was like she was seduction made manifest. Clearly, Cheon Suji was well aware of her strengths. She seemed very well versed in how she should act to look flattering, what kind of look she should produce to arouse her opponent, and how to use her appearance to her advantage. Sponsored content. She extended a hand as snow white as her face with natural grace. Make a promise with me. What kind of promise? If you lose to my teammate Gilsup, come drink with me once. At night, just the two of us. Reckless guys like you are my type, you see. But her state of ridicule and contempt exposed her too much for me to believe that. I looked at her extended pinky. Her little scheme was obvious to my eyes. Innate ability, Lust Venom Finger. Her innate ability hadn't been revealed even in the future, but I was able to see it with observer's eye. She's got an amusing ability. Lust Venom Finger. A finger that inflicts lust poison. Eye of Perception had long since shown me the name of her ability, and observer's eye traced the flow of mana in her body. I saw energy flowing towards her fingers. One part of her mana was gathered in her fingers, one part near her heart, and another part in her eyes. I was almost certain I knew what she was up to. She wants to work me up before the PvP, I guess. It was hard to tell how effective Suji's current level of innate ability would be on me, but I guessed it would only cause a little acceleration in my heartbeat or breathing, at most. But even just that could easily have a big influence on the PvP match. So what should I do? What would the Guardians like to see me do? What kind of play should I show them? I thought for a moment. Cheon Suji stared openly at me with her white face and eyes of seduction that radiated the pheromones of the opposite sex. You won't promise me? At the same time, my Eye of Perception perceived something. Eye of Perception perceives a seductive energy. Eye of Perception is higher in grade than the seductive energy. Eye of Perception completely destroys the seductive energy. It went beyond simple destruction. The grade difference between Eye of Perception and the seductive energy has been evaluated as very high. Oh ho, I'd never heard a notice like that before. I did expect Cheon Suji to take the initiative to approach me. That was something I had already known. I was sure she would approach me somehow and try to pull something. I was planning on using that to prepare for the centipede cave, but I hadn't expected this kind of notice to come up. The proficiency of Eye of Perception is at least 2. The unlock condition for a new Eye of Perception ability has been fulfilled. Sponsored content. The seductive energy Cheon Suji used seemed to be an exceedingly low-level ability. My Eye of Perception proficiency was at 2. The system recognized a very high-grade difference, and thanks to that, a new Eye of Perception ability was unlocked. A power of Eye of Perception, Mirror Sight, has been activated. Last time, when I fought Kim Taechin, I got the additional power, Future Sight. Yet another new power was activated. This time, it was Mirror Sight. Mirror Sight. An eye that reflects intangible energy. This power has a strong reflective ability against all non-physical mental attacks, including vital energy. However, it will only activate when the energy trying to violate the wielder is markedly lower in grade than the wielder's Eye of Perception. If Mirror Sight is used on an ability of equivalent or higher grade, the user may lose their eyesight. The new power given to me, Mirror Sight, could reflect energies that were much lower in rank than Eye of Perception. I can't use it carelessly. If I used it wrong, I could even lose my vision. However, it was safe to use it this time. Use Mirror Sight? I used it immediately. Since I just got it, why not give it a try? Cheon Suji's body instantly flinched. What was the energy I'd reflected just now? Ah, it was seductive energy. Did that make me the one seducing her, then? At its current level, she won't get super seduced or anything like that. It would just make her eyes a little more drawn to me, or make me look a little more handsome for no reason. That was all, so I didn't think it would cause any trouble for me. Once Mirror Sight kicked in, Cheon Suji's mana flow got tangled up. By the looks of it, the activation of Lust Venom Finger was cancelled. I spoke to the momentarily speechless Suji. What will you give me if I win? Whatever you want. I stuck out my pinky and hooked it with hers. Her Lust Venom Finger had been deactivated, so it shouldn't be dangerous. Don't forget your promise. I want the rot water that poison class players can make. After finishing what I had to say, I turned my gaze away from Cheon Suji and fixed my eyes on Song Kyeol right next to her. Guildmaster Song Kyeol, you have disappointed me considerably. I apologize. Miss Suji insisted so strongly that. Thankfully, Song Kyeol didn't deny it. He acknowledged his fault and immediately apologized. He wasn't too unsightly. I apologize for acting rashly. No matter how successful and strong Cheon Suji might be, she would have never made a move with Song Kyeol right there unless he was in on it. That meant she had informed him of her intent in advance, and the Guildmaster had given her tacit consent. Yes, you were wrong. I would like this to be a fair PvP. The looks in the eyes of the Taeguk Shield Guild members changed a little, as if they saw me in a slightly different light after I saw through Suji's little trick with one glance. Sponsored content. But there won't be a second time. Sound me out like this one more time and I will not work with Taeguk Shield. They were trying not to show it, but I could feel the guild members' displeasure. They were probably thinking something like, who the hell are you to think you deserve to work with Taeguk Shield? They must think they're Korea's top elites. They were a guild sponsored by Sungshin, after all. On a guild level, they were indeed the top in Korea. But individually, they don't reach the 8 heroes. That went for the Taeguk Shield Song Kyeol as well. They're still frogs in a well. I would show these frogs in a well of far broader sky. Byun Gilsip stood in front of me. My name is Byun Gilsip. My main weapon is the spear. My name is Kim Hyukjin. No real main weapon. For now, I tended to reach for the sword, but it was hard to call it my main weapon, since my most used skill, Excellent Strike, wasn't limited to the sword. We finished up our simple introductions. Class, Sovereign. Class, Spearman. I took a look with Eye of Perception. Player. Name, Byun Gilsip. Age, 26. Level, 30. Class, Successor of the Rain family. Guardian. Gatekeeper of the Old Grave. Innate ability, Instant Acceleration. State. Desire to win, desire to destroy, restraint. Disposition. Risk taker, impatient. Summary. Spearman full of desire to destroy. The disposition, state, summary only show the most representative and can change according to the situation. Because Eye of Perception's proficiency is not high enough, viewing more detailed information is impossible. His innate ability was instant acceleration. I only learned this while interacting with future top rankers, but there was a world I didn't know about. There were countless people out there who couldn't unlock a single innate ability, but these people had at least one innate ability starting from the beginner period. This is why they say playing is all about talent. A somewhat bitter world where you couldn't stand on the top with effort alone versus the wretched world of futility that I'd experienced in the past. Sponsored content. In any case, I wasn't very nervous. I already knew a lot about Byung-gilsep, including how he would attack. Disposition. Risk-taker, impatient. Summary. Spearman full of desire to destroy. Using this disposition and summary as a base, I already knew how he would move. It was so very clear that I didn't even need to use future sight. As soon as the match began, he would come charging at me full blast. Tisk, tisk, how can you be so worked up before we've even begun? The PvP zone was established through Senia. A PvP zone has been declared. The courageous Lion King is focusing. The nameless observer is observing. The Lady of the Scales is indicating her interest. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain is full of anticipation. The start and end of this PvP was already set in stone. It was just the process in between that would change a little depending on the situation. One more person. Who will it be? It would be great if the herdsman of the Las Vegas or the merchant of Venice were to send a notice. Depending on which of the two was focusing on me, I would change my playstyle a little. Not sending? Right on cue, a notice came in. The herdsman of Las Vegas watches with interest. It was the herdsman of Las Vegas. Without missing the perfect timing, I spoke. It was true that life was all about timing, but the ability to create and seize that timing was also a skill. Mr. Byung-gilsep, do you like to bet? What? The herdsman of Las Vegas is even more interested. As he should be. Gambling and bets were the first things to come to mind when you thought of the herdsman of Las Vegas. Would you like to have a bet with me? Well then, shall we play? With the herdsman of Las Vegas. Chapter 97. Sponsored content. What kind of bet? Byung-gilsep tilted his neck, probably wondering what kind of nonsense I was spouting all of a sudden. I will not move from this spot. What? The first strike, I won't defend against it at all. What do you mean? I'm sure you know where the vital points of humans are. Try attacking one of those points with all your strength. Of course, I won't dodge. Gilsep's expression hardened. He was likely thinking that I was underestimating him right now. Will I truly be able to take that hit without dodging, or will I die? Just what in the world are you saying? Exactly as it sounds. I am certain that I will be able to take that attack without any damage. I provoked him a little more. The reason why I requested a private PvP today was to show everyone here a new world. I wanted to show these frogs in a well that the sky was far bigger than the well-sized piece they'd been staring up at all this time. I will defeat you with an overwhelming difference in skill, to convince everyone in Taeguk's shield. The spear Gilsep was holding quivered. How about it, Mr. Byung-gilsep? An attack with every ounce of your strength. Would you like to try? I swear that I am not a tank. Let's bet on whether someone who isn't a tank like me can take such an attack without any damage or not. Sure enough. The Lady of the Scales advises against unnecessary provocation. The nameless observer observes. The courageous Lion King is frustrated. The whispering devil claps his hands with glee. The herdsman of Las Vegas is very interested. Gilsep raised his spear. Fine, he gritted, grinding his teeth. That high and mighty confidence of yours, let's see how long it can last. It looked like he was pretty pissed off. Well, he was a player with a lot of pride, so he was probably even more galled. Who would have thought that a non-combat class player who wasn't even a tank, but a sovereign, would ever be treated with such scorn? I can't say for certain, but there was a high chance the herdsman of Las Vegas made some kind of proposal to Gilsep. If he accepted my bet, he might have a chance at a big reward. Sponsored content. Which is why he accepted without hesitation. All the Taeguk Shield Guild members were staring at me in bafflement, except for just one of them, Cheon Suji. That made me sweat a bit. Was mirror sight too effective? There was slight but unmistakable interest in her gaze. Whatever, it'll probably fade soon. I'll make you regret it within 1 minute, said Gilsep. Our PvP match began. Byung-gilsep raised the main weapon he'd enjoyed using lately, Nox's spear. It had an attack power of around 35. He was sure of it. Excluding powerful blunt weapons, it has the highest damage. Blunt weapons could deal a heavy, powerful blow, but they were much harder to swing. To use them, you had to sacrifice a lot of dexterity. But Gilsep's weapon was different. I believe in you, Nox's spear. He finished all his preparations to penetrate the heart of the rookie who had arrogantly claimed he would show them all a different sky. I'll stab through. He drew back his arm, leveling his spear so it was parallel to the ground. A single point stab. When his spirit IP reached the target point, he would increase the rotational force. You will definitely regret this. He loaded the balls of his feet with far more strength than usual. That was so he could deliver a stab with all his weight behind it. You couldn't use such an exaggerated movement in a real battle, since there would be too much danger of counterattack if you threw all your weight into one attack like this. I'll stab his heart. Song Keol observed Gilsup in silence. He, of course, did not doubt Gilsup's powerful stab. His target seems to be the heart. The heart was a big weak point for humans. And yet, Hyukjin was allowing an undefended attack on such a vulnerable spot. Did sovereign players have some kind defense skill? Here I come. Gilsup's spear surged forward in a horizontal line with all his weight behind it, looking like he was one with the spear. The point of his spear rushed in unwaveringly, aiming precisely for a single spot. Hyukjin wasn't all that shaken by it. It's coming. There was a very brief moment during which he read Gilsup's movement. This was the strongest single attack Gilsup was capable of, his strongest stab. He saw how Gilsup's body moved to create the stab, how the mana in his body flowed. Sponsored content. Thud. Something hit his heart. The Great Orc Warrior's partial set effect is activating. All damage has been nullified. The strike that should have gone through his heart felt like a kid's weak fist hitting his chest. Actually, it couldn't even really be called an impact, since it was as weak as the kind of drumming you did when your chest felt stuffy. Huh. Gilsup made an expression of disbelief. There was 0 damage? Hyukjin grinned. Are you sure that was your strongest attack? Song Keol was just as flabbergasted. He did think that Hyukjin had something up his sleeve, but he never thought Hyukjin would be able to shrug off Gilsup's attack with absolutely 0 damage. What in the world was that? Just then, Han Somin said, "It's the power of items." Hyukjin nodded. He hadn't intended on keeping it a secret anyway, and he knew that Taeguk's shield had Han Somin. He had seen a glimpse of Han Somin's ability in action in the Hill of Blowing Wind. This man, who would one day become famous as the analyst, wouldn't find it difficult to figure out this much. Seeing as he concluded that, it's the power of items instead of, it's probably the power of items, he's pretty skilled. The analyst Han Somin, he might be second best now, but he would be a big help later on. Plus, he would be a pretty good match with Hyukjin, an observer. Song Keol still had a look of disbelief on his face. No matter how good the item was, how could it completely nullify Gilsup's attack? It was mind-boggling. No item he could think of was capable of that. That mystery item Hyukjin possessed had completely blocked an attack from a determined spearman aiming at a vital point. Wasn't that essentially like giving you a second life? Hyukjin explained. Being overgeared is also a skill. Since he had decided to show them the broad sky above, he elaborated in slightly greater detail. Simply subduing Byun Gilsup was meaningless. A set effect that completely blocks any attack from under level 35 kicked in. There's an effect like that? Do you think President Song was blinded by new tech for no reason? Think he didn't expect an effect like this? Hyukjin continued to talk to Keol, completely ignoring the spearman he was in a PvP with. Do not underestimate new tech too much. Since he was doing this, he wanted to raise them well. Because Taeguk's shield may just become the cornerstone business of Sungshin. That was enough to drive in his point. Song Keol had seen the power of new tech for himself. Having a vague estimation of something's power was worlds apart from seeing it in action. Keol felt goosebumps rise on his arms. Mr. Kim Hyukjin isn't PvPing right now, he thought numbly. This wasn't a PvP. It was a lecture, one given to him and the guild members Taeguk's shield while everyone was gathered in one spot. Sponsored content. He's educating us. It stung his pride, but Keol would take what was offered. The business that could give him a definite edge in the competition with his little sister was the new tech business. The attack just now had engraved that lesson in his bones. Hyukjin smiled. Summary. Guildmaster who met his teacher. Song Keol seemed to finally have the right mindset. Only once he was satisfied with his progress on the Guildmaster did Hyukjin turn his gaze back to Byun Gilsup. The spearman looked like he had suffered quite the shock. There is a wide range of item effects. The effect and worth of items will completely change based on how you distribute and use them. Gilsup regripped his spear. I've lost the bet, but I haven't lost the PvP yet. That's true. Hyukjin tossed him a little hope. The absolute defense ability I just used can only be used once per day. Before he regressed, the set effect of the Great Orc Warrior set was simply a natural part of everyday life. Something so well known that there were all sorts of strategies that hinged on it. There was no need to bend over backwards to keep it a secret, so he used it to teach a lesson instead. The players need to get their act together. Thanks to Hyukjin, the difficulty of the Korean server was noticeably reduced, and as a result, the players were quite a bit weaker than they were in the past. He judged that a little education was necessary in order to strengthen what was weakened. If Taeguk Shield changes first, becoming more proactive after realizing the worth of new tech for themselves, it will definitely influence the other players to do the same. This wasn't just a PvP, but a stroke in the big picture. The Guardians who were watching all this from one step away scrambled to send messages. The Lady of the Scales is awed by your unbiased view. The Barrier of Blue Light keenly understands your feelings. The Justice-aligned Lady and Defense Attribute Barrier Guardians actively endorsed him. The Courageous Lion King is bored. The Courage Lover was bored. Sponsored content. The Whispering Devil snorts at your scheme. And the Whispering Devil wasn't very amused by his playing. The Nameless Observer continues to observe. The Nameless Observer seemed to always be among the 5 Guardians who sent messages. As usual, they were maintaining their neutral position. In any case, I've sufficiently shown the Guardians the picture I'm going for, too. That meant it was time to wrap up the PvP. Let's return to the PvP, said Hyukjin. Then, he pulled out Yunzio's sword, the item of a grade he hadn't even been sure had existed. This time, I will use a sword. The movements of the future spear demon Byun Gilsip were fast. He appeared to be stepping straight forward, but suddenly swerved right and left as he aimed for Hyukjin's side. Hiya! He made it seem like he was going for the side, but his spear whipped upwards without any warning and came down like a guillotine. Whumph! His spear shaft came hurtling down towards the crown of Hyukjin's head. Hyukjin had completely read Gilsup's movements. He nudged the spear shaft away with his palm, twisting. It was difficult to block a vertical strike from the bottom. At worst, the impact could even fracture his wrist. Instead of opting for a reckless head-on match of strength, Hyukjin slipped away to the side. I can see the opening. If he immediately rushed in and swung his sword, he could easily subdue Gilsup. However, he didn't do so. What a strange feeling. It was similar to what he had experienced when fighting Kim Taechin, an opponent far weaker than himself. A similar feeling to when he'd gotten Eye of Perception's special power, Future Sight. A strange feeling, like he could see something. No, I can actually see it more clearly than that. The King of Swords Asura was showing him the sword path, and unbeknownst to Hyukjin, he was being drawn into it. Hyukjin, who had never learned swordsmanship, began to learn. Chapter 98. Sponsored content. Asura is showing me the sword path. I was definitely the one moving the sword, but it felt like Asura itself was fighting. I could see new paths and points I hadn't seen before. I could have pierced his forehead just now. But once again, I stayed my hand. All these paths and points, the so-called sword path, were a new learning experience and lesson for me. My movements have become much lighter, too. I realized that my movements had become very similar to Yunzio's. Of course, they weren't as clean as hers. Looking purely at sword-related technique, Yunzio was a step above me. But I had something Yunzio didn't. Stats and items. With the edge they gave me, I was creating movements that almost mirrored hers. I was physically creating a technique. Modifying Heavenly Demonic Flying Step into a foot technique would probably feel something like this. I could feel that I was growing in the midst of battle. It was different from fighting a monster. My growth felt far faster when I was facing humans. I swung my sword in a trance, in the state that was called being one with the sword. After not much time passed, I heard a notice. The innate ability, sword path tracing, has been awakened. Huh? The notice startled me out of the trance I'd been in. Sword path tracing? Sword path tracing. An ability that creates sword paths. No matter the situation, it will trace sword paths to attack an opponent within attack range. For a moment, I nearly forgot I was in a battle against Gilsup. This is a pretty famous innate ability. It was an innate ability typically possessed by cream of the crop swordsmen, commonly called the swordsman rankers. At least 50% of them possessed the special talent called sword path tracing. And I acquired that. No, I didn't acquire it, I awakened it. Sponsored content. Innate abilities were talents you already had within you, already existing abilities that could be awakened via special means. I had unintentionally unlocked another innate ability. Even if I were going mad with pain, even if I myself couldn't see any paths, even if I lost both my arms, it will create a path and follow through, no matter what. That was the power of sword path tracing. Both your arms could be cut off and the ability would still carry out the attack as long as the opponent was within attack range. There was even a case where the sword ghost Li Changhyun successfully pierced the red eye by gripping his sword with his teeth because his arms had been cut off. I felt a surge of happiness. It kinda feels like I just got a killer move. The day would undoubtedly come when I would be able to make very good use of this new card. I fought Byun Gilsup with leisure, moving far more naturally and smoothly than before, now that Asura had taught me to read sword paths. From the side, Yunseo perceived it clearly. Hyukjin had gotten stronger once again. Every time she thought she was catching up to him, he pulled ahead again, and the process repeated. Looking at her rival made her feel a burst of agitation once again, a feeling that quickly transformed into happy excitement. Excitement from seeing a strong person, and happiness from the fact that she was that strong person's closest teammate. Like I said, he's got a serious talent for exciting people. She filled her eyes with the sight of Hyukjin. Just then, Byun Gilsup's spear fell out of his hands. Ha, ha. Hyukjin's sword, Asura, rested lightly on the spearman's throat. Do you acknowledge defeat? The panting Gilsup bit his lips. He had no choice but to acknowledge defeat, but he was being stubborn. It was hard for him to acknowledge that he, a spearman class player, was defeated by a sovereign class. And that was a result Hyukjin had intentionally crafted. I'm sure he's quite pissed. Hyukjin intentionally showed him openings and chose not to attack. He gave Gilsup many opportunities to win. Reason number 1 was because he was having fun with the new ability Asura had given him. And reason number 2 was to agitate Byun Gilsup even more. The spearman spoke, barely managing to swallow his rage. It seems that the sovereign class has many chances to acquire good items. Yes, of course, it's called sovereign for a reason. Your items are so strong that I'm left wondering if this is truly a fair fight. By the standards of the future, that was a completely ridiculous thing to say. In the future, the item halo was recognized as another kind of skill. That was just a natural fact of life. But in the beginning days of playing, being overgeared wasn't recognized. In the early game, the public sentiment in not just Korea, but the whole world, was stacked against items in PvP. Hyukjin was keenly aware of that. It's the same now, huh? The flow of the past and now was the same. Items, you say? Sponsored content. Hyukjin handed the Asura he was holding to Yunseo, simply returning it to its original owner. He also gave the wind shoes +1 back to Sunghyun. Alright then, I've passed on all the outstanding items. He stopped himself from saying one more thing, which was, I haven't even used the special ability of the wind shoes. He thought he would need to use imaginary running start at least once, but that wasn't the case. His thoughts on the battle with Byun Gilsup were simple. It's way easier than I expected. The PvP was way easier than he thought, even considering he had the help of Asura. On the other hand, you have something called the class halo, Mr. Byun Gilsup. Am I wrong? That's... If you want to comment on items with me, it's only right to talk about your class halo first. Gilsup wasn't the type of person to harp on the ridiculous. He was rendered speechless for a moment. Though well, even your class halo is meaningless. Hyukjin closed in on the spearman instantly using flash step, an attack he'd shown everyone here before. He got behind Gilsup's undefended back and stabbed his neck with a dagger, severing the carotid artery. You mustn't let your guard down until the very end. It all happened in an instant. It was you who said that the PvP hadn't ended yet. With a single attack, blood surged out of Gilsup's neck. Hyukjin released his grip. Plop. The spearman slumped to the ground like a puppet with cut strings, dying on the spot. You have won the PvP match. Cheon Suji's eyes widened as she watched. She hadn't been able to read Hyukjin's movements just now. A clean strike free of superfluous movements. No, it wasn't just about being clean. It was downright terrifying. The way he cut a person's throat was extremely natural. They might be in a PvP zone where players were resurrected, but even so, severing a living person's carotid artery wasn't something just anyone could do. Just now, Hyukjin almost looked like a demon of slaughter who had killed 1,000, tens of thousands of times. Suji felt the breath catch in her throat. Scary. It was scary and terrifying. She replayed it in her mind and found that she wouldn't have been able to avoid that merciless strike, either. She was sure of it. Sponsored content. If that man wanted to, he might be able to kill all of us here. No, she knew that was an exaggeration. But still, she felt a strange sense of pressure from that man. Her heart thumped unbidden, and a strange nervousness, a strange fear, pulsed through her veins. And in the midst of it, there was a tingly, exhilarating thrill. Her heart began to beat wildly. That man, I want him. In the meantime, Byun Gilsup revived in a flash of light. After reviving, Gilsup's face flushed red. Hyukjin grinned at him in open provocation. We can fight again if you like. But Gilsup had already felt it. Facing Hyukjin was like facing a wall. He was a strong person Gilsup couldn't even begin to face with his current skills. I'm furious. He was angry, but there was nothing he could do. A defeat was a defeat. And I'm scared. On one hand, he was furious, and on the other, he was scared. Those two contradictory emotions gripped him as Hyukjin continued talking. I'm a sovereign class. You're a spearman class. I imagine that 1 versus 1 PvP is a spearman's specialty. Though in terms of the result, the class difference was pretty much meaningless. Hyukjin himself was a little fascinated. It had simply been too easy. Even if two people were the same level and a similar class, their abilities would be heaven and hell apart based on talent. They were both men in their 20s, but there was a marked difference in skill within that group. Even though Byun Gilsup should be a player with a talent that Kim Taechin can't even compare to. And yet, he won, and far more easily than he expected. So easily that he wondered if this was really alright. In any case, he successfully carried out the first round of forestalling, which meant he could also get the thing Cheon Suji had promised him. This was where it really began. I've brought all my party members here. He'd gone out of his way to bring all his party members here for this picture. After winning a 1 versus 1 and provoking the other party, they would have a group battle. Hyukjin wanted to prove not only his individual strength, but his overwhelming skill even in a guild versus guild battle. He wanted to show them that there was a true sky beyond the one they knew. We've had a battle that shows off your specialty. Hyukjin stared at Song Kyeol as he spoke. So how about having a battle that shows off mine this time? It's only fair that I also get a chance to show you what a class halo is. What do you think? Kyeol fell into a moment of thought. What Hyukjin was saying was that direct battle wasn't his forte, so they should come at him if they had the balls, and he would show them his true ability, the sovereign class. The gears in Kyeol's brain turned rapidly, flicking the abacus beads of profit and loss from accepting this battle. He realized Hyukjin's intent. Hyukjin wasn't asking them to fight like this simply to provoke. His intent is clear. Sponsored content. A simple fight wasn't what he wanted. Goosebumps rose up not just on his arms, but on the back of his neck. How can a person like him possibly be 20 years old? He was almost sure he knew what Hyukjin intended. When he realized it, Kyeol found himself growing calm. First, to show not just his individual dominance, but the dominance of his entire team. In addition. Second, to bolster my assertion that we need to actively cooperate with his party. In other words, to prove that his discernment as the guildmaster of Taeguk Shield was correct. Third, to make the Taeguk Shield guild members submissive by showing an overwhelming difference in skill. In other words, he was preempting every possible problem. Once he fully realized Hyukjin's intent, Kyeol had to really think for a moment. If things went as Hyukjin intended, it was almost guaranteed that Taeguk Shield would be defeated. He couldn't be sure if their loss would truly be a good thing. And if we were to win? That would be good in its own way. He had more than enough willingness to cooperate with Hyukjin anyway. From what Kyeol had seen so far, Kim Hyukjin had competence in spades. If Taeguk Shield won, Kyeol would be able to take a slightly more favorable position in their relationship moving forward. We will do our best to win. Winning was of course good, but there wasn't much to lose from losing, either. That was the kind of big picture Hyukjin had drawn for him. And so, he accepted. I accept your proposal, Mr. Kim Hyukjin. Their side had a rough estimation of the other side's forces, compiled based on the eyewitness reports of the survivors from the Hill of Blowing Wind. Kyeol figured that they might have a slight edge in that regard. Hyukjin spoke to Senya. Senya, can you declare a GVG zone instead of a PvP zone? The declaration of a GVG zone requires the sponsorship of a guardian. Not long afterwards, Senya spoke again. It is possible to declare a GVG. This GVG will be sponsored by the Herdsmen of Las Vegas. Notices came in. A GVG zone has been declared. Moving to the GVG zone. The players were covered in light, and no one was able to see the profound smile on Hyukjin's lips. Song Kyeol's belief that this was a big picture drawn Hyukjin drew for him was only half right. Chapter 99. Sponsored content. I craned my ears to hear the notices. We're probably the first people to have satisfied the GVG conditions. If PvP was player versus player, GVG was guild versus guild. The scale varied depending on the situation, but it was often called a small-scale war. Is it one after all? Whether the first GVG was a hidden piece or not was a long-standing debate. Was the first GVG truly a hidden piece? No one had confirmed which guild was the first to open a GVG. Several guilds claimed to have held the first GVG, so everyone said something different. Now, I would be able to resolve this age-old question. GVG content was actually something that showed up in the mid-game, so I had pulled it way forward in the timeline. The next moment, I heard a notice. This is the first GVG. A hidden piece has been fulfilled. We had been moved to an open clearing. The ground was hard cement, and it was a plain, featureless place with no slopes or obstacles, kind of like a training hall. The opposing guild, the guild members of Taeguk Shield, grew wide-eyed. Hidden piece? A hidden piece was triggered. Their faces were flushed with great excitement. Seeing their reactions, Sunhwa tilted her head. Oppa, was a hidden piece really that amazing? Yeah, it was. Ordinary people were hardly ever able to experience a hidden piece, and finding an unpublicized one was near impossible. I thought about telling Sunhwa that, but I didn't. She probably won't get it. After being exclusively around me and other players with top-level talent, her common sense was very twisted. If I had to guess, it might be something like a rich kid who had a chauffeur not knowing how much a bus ticket cost. In the end, I settled for just saying, normally, they're hard to find, and Sunhwa nodded, but as I thought, she didn't seem all that convinced. In any case, it was true that this was a hidden piece. A new quest was given on the heels of the last notice. The hidden quest, Achieve Victory in the First Battle, has been triggered. This was a reward given by the system itself and had nothing to do with the reward from the sponsor of this battle, the Herdsman of Las Vegas. Song Kyeol was, of course, a little flushed as well. Shall we begin the battle? One moment please, there is something I need to check. Let's begin a little bit later. Understood. With that, their side earned some time to strategize, which our side needed as well. Sponsored content. Boss Hyukjin, how should we act now? Hold on. Strategizing was important, too, but there really was something I needed to check. The yellow marks in front of my eyes. The hidden piece, Achieve Victory in the First Battle, has been fulfilled. There is a title that can be connected to the first discovery of the hidden piece, Achieve Victory in the First Battle. That title was, First Pioneer. Will you connect the title, First Pioneer, with the hidden piece, Achieve Victory in the First Battle, and trigger the link scenario? I checked the details immediately. If a player with the First Pioneer title is the first to discover a hidden piece, it is possible to trigger a link scenario. Link scenarios can be triggered 3 times. Link scenarios triggered. 1/3. Linked hidden piece. Pioneer who sees the first victory. Scenario. Make a significant contribution in the upcoming war. Upon clearing the scenario quest, the title, First Pioneer, will be upgraded to Pioneer of Victory. A link scenario came up. For the Gold Turtles Collective Spirit and the Soul Station Dungeon, I chose No, and for the Challenge to the Jackpot, I chose Yes. This time, my choice was Yes. The part about making a significant contribution was a little vague, but I judged that it was best to accept this time. The reward was a title upgrade, of all things, and the title in question was one with a whopping 20% additional EXP bonus. Upgrading it if possible was a no-brainer. The connection between the title effect and hidden piece has been completed. I made my decision. The GVG with them was part of the picture from the start, ever since I was first notified about the First Players Convention. Ever since I whispered to Senia and told her I would bring Taeguk Shield under me. This situation was part of my plan. I'll distribute the roles starting now. Listen up. The reason why I came here in the first place was to prove my ability as a sovereign. And now, it was time to do that. Hyukjin was already well aware of the other side's forces. All of them would be famous players in the future. The numbers didn't match up, so one of them stepped out for a total of 6 players. The Taeguk Shield, Song Kyeol. The Poison Witch, Cheon Suji. Sponsored content. The Golden Priest, Gong Jinhoon. The Spear Demon, Byun Gilsip. The Analyst, Han Somin. The Sand Giant, Shin Konga. Each of them would grow into rankers everyone would acknowledge. But Hyukjin's side weren't easy foes, either. The Fist King, So Yu Hyun. The Fire Lord, Choi Sung Ji Yu. The Typhoon, Jo Sung-hyun. The Sword Empress, Shin Yunseo. They weren't just easy foes, but people who were actually far more famous. Not yet, but still. With the Kim siblings, Hyukjin and Sunhwa, added to the four, their team had 6 players as well. The GVG has begun. As soon as the match began, Hyukjin used his special skill, Flash Step. His goal was to get behind the Golden Priest, Gong Jinhoon. The blonde-haired man was currently wearing a silver armor item, and all for a simple goal, to hide that he was a healer. I already know that you're a healer. Closing in instantly, Hyukjin stabbed at Gong Jinhoon's neck with his dagger. Rather, he tried to. Song Kyeol had reacted with alacrity. I knew you'd do this. The Taeguk shield Kyeol protected Jinhoon's neck with a special energy. Hyukjin had already shown them Flash Step before, and Han So-min had analyzed Hyukjin's most likely first step, using that as a base. For a very brief moment, Song Kyeol tasted the hope of victory. It was exactly as So-min analyzed. If that side had the sovereign Kim Hyukjin, their side had Han So-min, a tactician class player who could even use a special ability called Oracle. The problem was that Hyukjin knew that Taeguk shield had Han So-min, and he knew So-min would read him. Hyukjin grinned. I knew, too. At the same time, Yunseo charged. Hyukjin was bait. The true attack was from Yunseo. She moved far faster than she normally showed, an explosive speed that wasn't quite as fast as Flash Step, but more than speedy enough to stab the opponent. She cut right into the momentary opening and pierced Gong Jinhoon's neck. Goo! Yunseo's single-hit finisher showed that it fully deserved its name. Jinhoon crumpled on the spot. He didn't die, but he flailed, unable to bear the pain. He wouldn't be able to heal in that state. In the meantime, Cheon Suji attacked Yunseo. Black marble-like spheres of poison sprayed towards Yunseo. Whoosh! A wind came out of nowhere. It was a man-made wind, a special breeze manifested via magic. A magic wind blew in. It was Jo Sung-hyun. I've already done this once before. They had already experienced a similar attack. The poison marbles were similar to the attack used by the ghosts on the Hill of Blowing Wind. The experience they'd gained from dodging those marbles was already engraved in their bodies. Sung-hyun slightly altered the trajectory of the poison marbles, and that slight change gave Yunseo a great deal of breathing room when dodging. Thanks, she called out, widening the space between them in an instant. Hyukjin hadn't been able to extricate himself yet, but Song Kyeol could sense that something was going off kilter. Sponsored content. Still, there was hope. We'll kill the sovereign. He knew that Hyukjin held a huge role in their party. If Hyukjin died, a big crack would definitely form in their side. Using the skill restraint. Something like a pool of blue mana appeared under Hyukjin's feet. It was Kyeol's skill, a restraining skill. Thinking that Hyukjin was restrained, Gilsup stabbed with his spear. Hya! The extremely fast attack looked as if it would pierce Hyukjin's heart, but he had already seen the future. Utilizing the power of future sight. Even Hyukjin couldn't predict every single situation that could occur in a battle. He couldn't overcome everything with his intuition and analysis alone. Therefore, he used future sight, though it would exhaust him. Through it, he read Byun Gilsup's attack like it was telegraphed. The spearman's goal was his neck. Though he's making it look like he's going for my heart. In the end, the path would end at his throat. It was probably a special skill that suddenly changed path and struck a different weak point. Something similar to sword path tracing. Hyukjin twisted a little. Armed in the Great Orc Warrior set, his defense far exceeded the average player's. I can definitely do it. As he slightly twisted, he pushed away Gilsup's spear. Break the weapon balance, and he rushed up to Gilsup. Splurt, splurt, splurt. He stabbed the dagger he was holding into Gilsup's side multiple times in quick succession. He wasn't greedy. Inflicting an injury was enough. Orya, Boulder Fist. With Yuhyun's assistance, Hyukjin got out of the Taeguk shield encirclement. It was only a brief confrontation, but the tide of the battle had already completely shifted. Song Kyeol couldn't believe it. May I ask you one thing? Anytime. Are you sure you are a non-combat class? Shin Yunseo moving much faster than expected was surprising on its own, but Hyukjin's movements were beyond all imagination. It was impossible to view him as a non-combat class. Sponsored content. His movements are one thing, but what the hell is that ridiculous tanking ability? He didn't just take an attack. He used his sturdy body and outstanding reflexes to knock away Gilsup's spear. Despite it being an unconventional attack, Gilsup didn't show in the PvP match. The unconventional nature of the attack meant absolutely nothing to Hyukjin, who saw through it in a single glance like he knew it was coming. As a result, he had the leisure to get close to Gilsip and had about 0.5 seconds to deal an injury. His ability to adapt, his agility, his situational judgment, all of it went beyond expectation. Keol thought to himself that this was how it would feel to meet a genius above geniuses. There's no doubt, I notarized it through my intermediate administrator. Hyukjin shrugged. Like I said, I'm a sovereign. There was no law forbidding a sovereign from directly engaging in battle, but still, this was too much, wasn't it? Song Keol asked again, just in terms of fighting capability alone. About where do you stand inside your team, Mr. Kim Hyukjin? It was an important question. Hyukjin grinned. I will only say that I am indeed a non-combat class player. Do you mean that you are the weakest one? I can't tank as well as this kid. I'm worse at single-hit DPS than Yuhyun. I'm slower than Yunseo, and of course, these two are better than me at magic. He shrugged again. Well, something along those lines. He smiled, giving a boast that wasn't just empty words. By the way, these guys haven't even gotten started yet. He phrased it exactly to make the Taeguk Shield Guild members misunderstand. The weakest one, the Sovereign, nearly single-handedly created this situation. He was saying one thing. Think you can really face us as a team when the weakest one among us was capable of wreaking such havoc? How did you cast off my restraint? That's a secret. It wasn't anything big, just that Hyukjin's magic resistance was far higher than Keol's restraining ability. Hyukjin was just as surprised when he saw the future via future sight. Guess my magic resistance is super high. Eye of Perception, which alerted Hyukjin to danger, didn't go off this time, which meant the guildmaster's restraint was simply that weak. There was just that much of a gap between them. Yun Gilsip is weaker than I thought, and so is Song Keol. They were all a little weaker than Hyukjin expected. While Hyukjin was feeling that it was easy, Keol felt like he was facing a massive wall. I really cannot see a way to win. It was like chipping away at a stone wall with a spoon. Just then, someone said to Hyukjin, we haven't gotten started yet, either. The voice belonged to Shin Konga, the player who would one day become famous as the Sand Giant. His extremely strong competitiveness made him a player who would rather die than lose. At Konga's words, Keol snapped out of his daze. It felt like they were fighting a wall, but they still had to do their best to the very end. His combative spirit blazed up again. Hyukjin raised his index finger. The GVG hasn't ended yet. I merely engaged in conversation because you asked me to. He pointed his finger at Song Keol and mumbled a stream of incomprehensible words. Keol panicked. Mag, I see? Sponsored content. Hyukjin raised his finger on purpose, as if he were going to do something. As if he were going to use magic. He pointed his finger at Song Keol and called out, bang. Keol flinched, an observer's eye captured the mana moving urgently in his body. That's the energy of a tank. Hyukjin couldn't put how it differed in words, he just felt it instinctively. That was the energy of a tank, an energy with a focus on defense. That energy covered the guildmaster's body, and Hyukjin had the feeling it was especially concentrated on the forehead. A cheeky voice came from behind Hyukjin. Hey, fooled ya, huh? It was Choi Sung-ji-yu. His flame whip was making another appearance. The magic was moving significantly more smoothly than before, an indication that his cooperation with Sung-hyun had become much more natural. Hyukjin's finger was a fake. Shabam, fiery flame tilde whip tilde. Sung-ji-yu and Sung-hyun's fusion magic, flame whip, smashed down on Shin Konga. Take this, goo. Foosh. Flames raged on Shin Konga's body. Hyukjin read Keol's mental state. Panic, mentally groggy. In order to properly block a spell from two mages who had been quietly preparing all this time, you would need the tank Keol, or Gilsip or Suji would have to attack the mages. Gilsip is injured, Suji is being marked by Sunhwa and Yunseo. That left Song Keol as the best person to block the spell, but he was completely tricked by Hyukjin's fake out. Hyukjin didn't think the spell alone was enough to kill Shin Konga. With his defense, he'll be able to survive it. Sure enough, Konga's body started to transform. Morph enhancement player. Sand wrapped all around his body, and it looked like he had become a sand person. He clearly took a lot of damage from the flame whip, but being injured didn't seem to restrict his movements as much as it did with Gilsip. Hyukjin saw Han Somin's mouth moving. He's probably telling his guild members what he analyzed with his special ability. Basically, they were doing something like a guild chat, but that was fine. Because I'm much higher ranked than Han So-min. There was no need to keep him in check. Taeguk Shield would be famous in the future, but they were still complete beginners to a GVG like this. No matter how outstanding their talent might be, they couldn't be perfect at something from the very start. Actually, rather than saying that Taeguk Shield was bad at this, it was more accurate to say that Hyukjin was simply doing too well. He was the odd one for being so proficient when it was also his first time. Shin Kanga shouted, "Die!" A massive fist of sand, a magic attack capable of dealing quite a lot of damage, surged into the sky. Sponsored content. Hyukjin stood quietly in place and stared at the sand fist without a hint of urgency. As a sovereign, he didn't look daunted in the least. The attack target is me. He simply watched. After all, their side had an amazing tank. Dream on. A shield glowing with white light formed above Sunhwa's right hand. Kanga's sand fist crashed into Sunhwa's shield and streamed to the ground as formless grains of sand. Meanwhile, Yunseo killed Gilsip and Yoo-hyun smashed So-min's head in. The result of the GVG was all too obvious. Kyeol's body trembled. This isn't just an ordinary difference in skill. He had to acknowledge the glaring truth in front of him. It's an overwhelming difference in skill. They were strong, so strong that Taeguk Shield should be the ones begging to cooperate. He was experiencing that with every cell of his body. Experiencing something personally was completely different from knowing something. This is for the best. His primary goal was indeed accomplished as planned. He just hadn't thought that they would be so overwhelmingly steamrolled even though they had done their best. Hyukjin patted Kyeol's shoulder. Today is the last time I will offer you trade conditions as an equivalent partner. Seize the opportunity, Guildmaster Song Kyeol. Coming closer, Hyukjin whispered very quietly in Kyeol's ear, I will prop up Taeguk Shield as Korea's heroes, as Korea's greatest guild. I will make it so that you can take the lead in propelling the new tech wave. This was the last opportunity. Kyeol had a gut feeling. If he failed to grasp this opportunity, Kim Hyukjin would give up on him. He would probably seek another guild to work with. It was possible that the next chance might be given to Kyeol's younger sister, Song Junghye. The person who would surely shape the future was Kim Hyukjin. It's our loss. I acknowledge our defeat. Reaper scans. Translator, Lei. Proofreader, Ash. Join our Discord for updates on releases. https://dsc.gg/reapercomics. Song Kyeol trudged out the elevator. What do I tell grandfather? 3 hours prior, up until the GVG started, Kyeol never doubted that it would be a well-matched fight. Their opponents might have named players like the tutorial ender, but he was confident there wouldn't be a huge difference in skill between the individual players. That was a miscalculation. Sponsored content. To think there was this much of a gap. As he headed to his grandfather's office, his steps became as heavy as lead. It wasn't like he failed to predict defeat, but it was also true that defeat was a bitter pill to swallow. Well, then, what are your thoughts after meeting Kim Hyukjin? Asked President Song, his hands laced together on his desk. He absolutely does not seem like he is 20 years old. President Song nodded. He had thought the same. The gaze and aura he'd noticed from Hyukjin was not something that could possibly come from a 20-year-old kid. His ability to manipulate the board was also outstanding. So much so that Kyung wanted the man as his hunting dog. No, he's not a hunting dog. Kyung had thought so before, but not anymore. Kim Hyukjin was not merely a hunting dog. If he had been born as one of Kyung's sons or grandsons, he might have become the ruler of Korea. That was how highly Kyung thought of him. It seems to me that you having a guild versus guild match with Kim Hyukjin was planned from the start. What? I get the feeling player Kim Hyukjin crafted the current situation step by step, starting all the way from his participation in the players' convention. Song Kyeol nodded at that. It really stung his pride, but he still analyzed the situation with a cool head. I believe there's a high possibility of that being the case. Who, you acknowledge it? President Song looked at his grandson with a look of slight surprise. Kyeol looked like he wasn't that displeased by the fact that he had been dancing in his opponent's palm, something that would have angered and wounded anyone's pride. President Song was inwardly satisfied to see it. Kim Hyukjin crushed us with an overwhelming difference in skill. He had us completely figured out and analyzed what we would do before the fight even started. It was embarrassing to admit, but Kyeol judged that nothing good would come of hiding things from his grandfather. His grandfather was someone who forgave mistakes and failures, but not lies. As a result, the guild members of Taeguk Shield, including me, were pushed into a situation where we had no choice but to acknowledge him. Skills proved everything. That was likely what Kim Hyukjin wanted from the start. The non-combat class Kim Hyukjin's movements were truly beyond imagination. Was that all? No, sir, his analysis was far more outstanding than the tactician on our side, Han So-min. And the fusion magic of Jo Sung-hyun and Choi Sung-ji-yu had me honestly intimidated. He was honest about everything. Being intimidated wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was natural to feel that way in front of someone far stronger than yourself. The important thing was what you learned from it, what you gained from it, that you didn't just wallow in defeat. Keol was well aware that that was what his grandfather wanted to see from him right now. Was it a big spell? Yes, I believe so. They didn't do anything in the beginning. I see. Kim Hyukjin's team must have bought them time to use that fusion magic. Yes. President Song nodded. They intentionally bought time to be able to use a big spell. They'd had the leisure to do so. In other words, they could have easily defeated you even without a big spell like that. And yet, they used a flashy and strong spell. It must have been a completely calculated move to break your spirits. Yes, I think so. Sponsored content. You said Jo Sung-hyun and Choi Sung-ji-yu met for the first time at the Players' Convention, yes? Yes, sir. The fact they could show a cooperative play of that level must mean that Kim Hyukjin had them practice beforehand. Which means he must have been preparing for today ever since the Hill of Blowing Wind. For the climax today. Song Kyoung stared at his grandson for a moment. He saw that Keol was biting his lip, unable to conceal a little anger. Good. He was well and properly stimulated by Hyukjin, a man 10 years his junior. If he could apply this stimulus in a positive direction, his grandson would be able to become a far greater person. Kim Hyukjin has already gathered teammates of that level and is nurturing them into their respective roles. Do you acknowledge that? Yes. Not only that, but he chose to put you guys in the front and operate in the back. I'm sure he intends on avoiding the public's excessive attention while garnering the actual profits. That will also greatly free up his movements. Then, by once again showing his overwhelming skills to other people of skill, he will reign as a skilled player among players. That wasn't all. And by choosing to cooperate with you, he will also get access to Sungshin's support. President Song smiled faintly without realizing it. 20 years old. He was only 20 years old. A 20-year-old created this picture and was thinking of taking only the good and leaving others to deal with the bad. It was almost chilling. And because it was chilling, President Song was delighted. Learn from his discernment. People are the greatest resources. Learn from his mindset. You will gain much from working with him. Keol was inwardly shocked. His grandfather never encouraged learning from someone. Kim Hyukjin, was that amazing? A 20-year-old was that amazing in his grandfather's eyes? It stung his pride, but stubborn determination reared its head in him regardless. I'll learn what there is to learn. He would maintain a public system of cooperation with Kim Hyukjin, and learn everything he could learn. He believed that was his ticket to personal growth. While learning from Kim Hyukjin, I will fully cooperate with him to advance the new tech project. Keol didn't forget to make his aspirations clear. One day, I will surpass Kim Hyukjin and lead Sungshin into the future. Sunhwa wasn't all that talkative when other people were around, but when it was just the two of us, she tended to talk a little more. I wasn't sure if it was because of puberty, or because she was a shy girl by nature. In any case, she was noisier when it was just us. We got out of the taxi and started walking home, going through the large park we had to cross to reach the apartment building. Oppa, before you distributed roles to us earlier. Yeah. You heard another notice, right? Did it show? Well, it wasn't something I was trying to hide, anyway. I told her the truth. Yeah, you know I have a title called First Pioneer, yeah? I know. Sponsored content. That was upgraded to Pioneer of Victory. Really? Is that really awesome then? Even better than fried chicken? It's almost on par with fried chicken. Whoa, it's huge then. I grinned in spite of myself. By clearing the linked hidden piece, Pioneer who seized the first victory, I was able to get the new title, Pioneer of Victory. Pioneer of Victory. A glorious title given to one who pioneered a new domain and seized the first victory in a new domain. All party members plus 20% experiment. Stacks with other titles. Stacks with other effects, buffs, debuffs. As soon as Sunhwa heard the title effects, her eyes grew round. She blinked in visible awe. Wow, Oppa, does that mean as long as we're in a party with you, we also get extra EXP? Yep, but you have to stay within a certain distance. It added wings to the observer class that could rake in EXP even while sipping tea. No matter who it was, they could get 20% more EXP simply by playing with me. It'll shine especially bright in the 30 to 40 period. An EXP buff, and one that applied to the entire party and could stack unconditionally with any effect, was an effect anyone and everyone would go crazy for. With an effect like that, it really is on par with fried chicken. Right? Oh yeah, Oppa, did you get something from that pretty Unny? Yeah, I got a special poison item called rot water. Dunno what that is, but it sounds weird. Does it? I tousled Sunhwa's hair. Let's just go in and get some chicken. I took a look at Sunhwa's state. Her face was flushed with excitement. State. Happy, proud, joyous. Me getting something good was a source of happiness and joy for her too. It was amazing. We didn't share a single drop of blood, but it felt like I really got a sister. Her happiness was infectious. This joy, I would protect it. Or more accurately, she would protect me. Sponsored content.